Ruler of the Windward Plains, Rey Dau is feared by man and fellow beast alike. Chiefly known for hunting like a phantom in the eye of the storm, as the top predator of the region it still holds considerable sway in how things function in the plains. So let's dive into the life of Rey Dau. As with all the inclemency apexes, one likely wonders what the connection between the inclemency and the apex is. Rey Dau is described as being seen and most active in the sand tide, a dark sandstorm severe enough to cause powerful electric discharge from the static buildup. So this is an event of both high wind speed and low visibility. The latter gives obvious benefits to predators, and in a few videos prior, including Kushalas, I've mentioned how storm events generally encourage sedentary behaviour in prey animals that allow predators to capitalise on such events for an easy meal. And for the most part this seems to be true in the plains as well, with Keratinoth herds and other monsters typically bedding down in groups to stay still unless disturbed. So this aspect of storm foraging likely applies here to Rey Dau too, who readily takes advantages of the reduced anti-predator behaviour for easier hunting. But it's also possible the wind speed may be nothing to sniff at either. For large flying animals capable of harnessing them, powerful wind speeds up to those essentially considered storms can actually be beneficial over detrimental. Wandering albatrosses actually have a very rare benefit from an anthropogenically changed climate, in that the faster, stronger winds exacerbated by climate change allow for faster, less costly travel to foraging areas. This in turn causes an increase in chick rearing success, as there's less time between meals, and larger albatross possibly from less time fasting on the nests, and to better benefit from these changes as well. Bigger birds having higher wing loading, which is better for accessing the strong winds. So Rey Dau may be similar, hunting in storms and following the sand tide due to the major energetic saving it represents, letting the strong winds do all the work for it. It may also allow it to travel vast areas quickly, with the winds increasing its flight speed like the albatrosses, and Rey Dau as a result may have huge territories that it can patrol comparatively easily due to the sand tide, which also increases the odds of prey encounter and thus prey capture, which may be a necessity in the barren plains and dunes. With the fact that Rey Dau is only very rarely seen by Konafa residents outside of the sand tide, it may be possible that it's also a partially migratory wyvern too, and has its migrations facilitated partly by the freak winds. It is also really worth stressing that just because albatrosses have been given a boost by climate change, to try and suggest that climate change is either good actually or not that bad, is of course still false. It and other anthropogenic factors still represent major threats to the oceans, and the biggest threat to albatross species today, among other marine life, and the boost is likely to be only temporary if such trends continue. It could be worth noting that Rey Dau may not specifically be designed to catch wind currents, and that most large flying wyverns can harness them to some degree as well. But Rey Dau may have partially changed due to having essentially permanent access to the rolling storms that may facilitate larger sizes and other aspects of its behaviour and physiology too. Some other wyverns show similar adaptations, and Legiana has adapted to harness lower power updrafts coming from the Rotten Vale for easier low effort gliding about the highlands as well. As a note of interesting trivia, it seems Rey Dau's scales are essentially constantly being burnished by the flying grains of the sand tide too, giving the wyvern its lustrous appearance. Rey Dau's scales and carapace may also play another related role in its ecology and behaviour. The carapace is described as being conductive, as one would expect from seeing it get struck by lightning to beneficial outcome. But as is often the case with electric wildlife, for every dramatic megablast used in fighting or predation, there's a lot going on beneath the surface that you don't see, and Rey Dau may use its carapace as a giant sensory organ in the sand tide. Lightning strikes from the friction of the sand grains will have a different energy signature to ones focused on Rey Dau or its nest, or indeed the shells of the Keratinoth bulls, Rey Dau's primary prey species. Keratinoth live in harems, with one bull to his group of females. And whilst the bull isn't especially competent at protecting against predators like Balachi or Talioth, they do have the major benefit of absorbing lightning strikes in the sand tide, providing a safe haven for their females in the weather event. Whilst it does seem that other herbivores like Aptonoth will also live in harems with the male playing some minor protective role, the sand tide may facilitate this social behaviour by encouraging female association with the lightning-proof males. As Rey Dau glides about in the winds, it may be constantly picking up different signals from the lightning strikes that happen around it, and zero in on certain signatures when it detects them. Despite the role the bulls play in protecting their harems from the thunderstorms, and against Rey Dau itself to some extent, Rey Dau may use them as Judas, to betray the location of the herd for hunting. Keratinoth are described as having usually one male to a herd, but then these herds we see will often aggregate at spots of food and water. This may then provide superior protection from the lightning strikes, with more of them being focused on the multiple males. If multiple males group together, then the wall of spikes could be a better deterrent to Rey Dau, should the males ring together and present a phalanx of spiked armour. But on the other hand, it may make the herds easier to find with the more prevalent energy signatures, and also risks ambitious males sneaking a mating with another bull's harem, or losing their females by getting them mixed in with another bull's harem for good. No matter which way they choose, Rey Dau has essentially played Keratinoth's greatest strength against them. Alone, and it can easier pick off the females. Together, and it can easier detect the herd. Rey Dau's preference for the females is interesting as well. Well armoured as the bulls are, Rey Dau will still use its talons to hunt, and so can take them down more manually too. Behaviour could explain it. It could be the natural caution that comes with not wanting to fly at high speed into a giant spike in low visibility conditions. Or Rey Dau may be instinctively less keen to hunt the males, due to the benefits of not silencing your own dinner bell, although that may be a bit 3D chess for a wyvern. The process also may help Rey Dau navigate, and to find its nest in low visibility conditions, where it simply follows the signature of the repeated strikes in a small area to get home. Rey Dau likely hunts at high speeds for the very scattered resources of the native herbivores, and often in low visibility environments. Whilst Keratinoth bulls may give something of a heads up, other viable prey like Dalthodon and Chatacabra likely don't. The large Balahara could be taken, but it's unknown if Rey Dau is usually willing to feed on animals it can't reliably carry away, especially because capturing one may quickly bring in a swarm. To get around this foraging conundrum, it may use Levy flight. This is a term in biology and physics, but in the former where the foraging patterns of animals resemble subatomic particles in a vacuum. Levy flight refers to the behaviour where, when dealing with scattered low-density resources, foraging animals and especially marine predators will undergo long straight traversing periods, followed by intensive searches of more promising spots or possible stimuli. In much richer environments, animals will rather use Brownian motion, where they wander randomly until encountering prey. It's undecided if this is a specific behaviour, or simply animals reacting to their environment, but this may be how Rey Dau forages too. With huge yet unproductive territories they patrol alone, it may use the sand tide to facilitate swift straight-line travel, to either hotspots like oases, or when it detects an anomaly in the thunderstrikes that may suggest a Keratinoth bull and its herd, that in turn prompts a more exhaustive search of the immediate area. If true, then it's hard to say if Rey Dau could be unique in this regard, and again it may not be behaviourally unique, and much more facilitated by the environment. Many other true flying wyverns like Rathalos and Legiana, in their preferred environments, live in much more rich areas that can presumably support foraging more resembling Brownian motion. Seregios may also use Levy flights, but being social nesters they may use each other for foraging like some birds of prey to cover a large area. Rathian may use Levy flights too, but may also be a more water-dependent wyvern than Rey Dau, and be much more localised to oases and waterholes in arid environments. Rey Dau's legendary use of thunder as a weapon is also interesting. with Rey Dau both storing electricity from direct lightning strikes, but also being able to produce its own too. As said, Rey Dau's hide is conductive, although what exactly the battery organs that store the lightning are is less known, unless Rey Dau just has a modified thunder sac that stores as well as it produces. The peculiar organs on the neck appear to be the final charge point before the main full power blast, and may operate like certain organs in electric animals that prime the charge before releasing. Rey Dau needs to close the bolt horns for general electric use, but only flares out the neck organs for the most powerful charges. These traits are similar to other electric animals. Electric eels have 3 electric organs: the sax organ for navigation and communication, the hunter's organ, and then the creatively titled main organ, which is the one that delivers the most powerful blasts for killing prey and potential predators too. The bolt horns on the face may be like the sax and hunter's organ, capable of sufficient charge to stun Karatanoth either close up or at distance, or indeed to deliver damaging shocks to opponents too. And then the glowing neck organs are like the main organ, only unfurled for the most devastating fulgur blasts. For other monsters, this may be a last warning before the blast, as whilst there is only usually a second or so before firing, Rey Dau may sometimes try to intimidate first. Big blasts are clearly costly. The neck organs may also have some role in signalling to other Rey Dau too. Essentially nothing is known of Rey Dau's social life or breeding, but like some other aerial predators, the fold-out organs could be used in socializing and display. Like many predators, Rey Dau's hunting would suffer if it had them on display constantly, so rather they can be unveiled for specific use in the appropriate moment, as is the case with some birds of prey and their brightly coloured throat pouches. The lower bolt horns also have the ability to emit electric charges, and it seems their primary use is in facilitating feeding. When capturing live prey, Rey Dau will paralyze it with a current from the mandibular bolt horns, and then eat it alive. When seen hunting in-game, Rey Dau do seem to typically kill their prey before carrying it away for consumption, using either a small electric shock, or the talons like many other flying wyverns. For the former, it could be that sometimes it doesn't kill outright, and the smaller bolt horns are to shock the prey into stillness again to prevent any accidents. For Rey Dau, that is. This could also be how Rey Dau get around the larger and better armoured male Karatanoths too, paralysing with a bolt horn bite rather than a shock blast. Another explanation could be it's an important step in the juvenile stages of hunting, and young Rey Dau may not be able to use their full powers until completely mature. So until then it uses paralysing bites to overcome a lack of body mass and the shock power compared to the adults. Like a handful of other monsters, Rey Dau has the issue of not blinding itself with the lightning bolts it produces from its own face, a problem also encountered by flashing monsters like Gypsaros and Sitsuyaku. And for this issue, the assorted monsters may have adapted pupils. Black skimmers will hunt and generally be active across the whole daytime period, but often with a peak of foraging in the low light of dawn and dusk. So they need to be able to handle a broad range of light conditions, whilst not damaging their retinas, but whilst still being able to fly to forage in the gloom. They get around this by having a huge size range their pupils can expand between, from a large open round pupil that's significantly larger than other diurnal birds in similar environments like terns, but is also able to shrink to a thin slit for the midday sun, almost like a cat. Presumably for such monsters they have a similar thing, and it's a neural connection between the muscles of the bolt horns and the eyes that automatically shrinks the pupil in time with the blast. This explains why Rey Dau can still be flash-bombed. When not adequately prepared and its pupils are still in sand-tide hunting mode, it's as vulnerable as any other wyvern. As the top predator of the Windward Plains, Rey Dau likely has some top-down effects on everyone else beneath it. Those further removed from Rey Dau probably have minimal competitive interaction, with Rey Dau and Chatacabra's relationship likely only being occasional predation when Rey Dau catches the toad short when foraging. Similarly, with Rey Dau seemingly being a central place forager, The amount of carrion it leaves for chemetries is probably fairly minimal, unless it kills another monster in a violent confrontation over a predatory one. But Balahara is where things may get interesting. Balahara's black scales are partially made from fulgurite, which Rey Dau itself will produce. This makes them vulnerable to Rey Dau's attacks. But as well as more abiotic sources, Rey Dau's thunder blasts may provide something of an attraction for Balahara. Whilst singly or even in a small group the Leviathan's a little match for the wyvern, and may also occasionally serve it as food, they could be a potential reason for Rey Dau's central place foraging. Balahara don't have great teamwork, but will keenly follow other members of the species, and can quickly mass into giant swarms that would overwhelm any wyvern. Rey Dau may be unwilling to eat outside of designated plucking posts, so as not to attract such swarms, and have the tables turned on itself. The closer in size another monster gets to Rey Dau itself, the more hostile it seems to become, to the point where Rey Dau is seemingly the most significant reason for why the Shagama prefer the forest to the plains. Unlike the smaller monsters, both the Shagama and Balahara dip into the main resource pool of herbivores in the plains for their own food, and Rey Dau's famed aggression isn't likely any more complex than good old-fashioned interspecific competition, seemingly to the point of partial exclusion and changes in social behaviour for the Shagama. Rey Dau may at least have some effect on the endemic life of the plains too, and especially the landlight shrimp. These terrestrial crustaceans eat essentially any organic matter they can find within the fulgurite, with a seeming preference for carrion, and they may also eat fulgurite itself too, or at least burrow through it, and so Rey Dau's blasts may well contribute to their food stocks. The fulgurite pillars and small chunks created by Rey Dau also attract living thunderbugs, who presumably have some resource they attain from the mineral too. Rey Dau's nest for the shrimp and the bugs would essentially be mana-filled heaven, perhaps being the single most dense source of fulgurite in the plains. As well as navigation as suggested, it could be Rey Dau uses this as a cleaning station, if it attracts the shrimp too. As said, it's unknown what Rey Dau find attractive in other Rey Dau, but it could be if unkempt, the build-up of fulgurite becomes unattractive on the wings, or possibly that, due to using their wings in combat, and so the crystals too, they may become clogged and matted with the remains of mangled foes. Rey Dau may regularly allow itself to be groomed by the shrimp to fix up either problem, either removing the fulgurite or polishing it up, for mating season especially. The wind's gasp would also be a safe place to keep the young as well, and with Balahara being the most frequent threat in the surrounding areas, an entire nest that's essentially electrified is a good deterrent to protect chicks if Rey Dau does indeed breed there. If so, then the landlight shrimp may be valuable allies there too. Despite sounding like a nightmare, studies show a nest full of maggots is far better than not, and bird species with minimal nest sanitation behaviours have better offspring health and survival, with greater numbers of fly larvae that eat the feces, dropped food and dead chicks. The fly larvae are saprobiotic species, and so don't eat living tissue or animals, and are very effective cleaners, devouring entire insects in hours. So maybe Rey Dau is the same, and hosts a huge number of the landlight shrimp in its nest that quickly polish off feces and prey remains to keep it as an ideal nursery, nap zone or love nest, depending on what Rey Dau uses it for. Considering Rey Dau brings carcasses back to the nest to eat, but it's not a complete boneyard, presumably someone is cleaning it. We have seen past wyvern nests in older games, and some are disgusting, so it's no surprise that other wyverns are also happy to allow camp followers into their nests for the purpose of cleanliness, and Rathian will engage in similar behaviours with small scavengers that eat rotting leftovers and keep the nest clean, although it's never specified what exactly these species are. In a similar vein, the nest could also be to attract other Rey Dau, and serve as a giant electrified bower. The megablasts Rey Dau makes are presumably taxing, and an extensively fulgurited nest could serve as a display of fitness in Rey Dau. Rey Dau doesn't just impact the behaviour of other monsters, And something interesting to consider is the role Rey Dau plays in Konafa culture. Whatever it is, it's a mixed reputation. On one hand, the villagers are terrified of Rey Dau, asking the hunter to take one down following the frenzy of the dragon spine. But it's also clearly held in high regard too. Konafa is decorated with gem chimes, which Rey Dau not only occasionally produces itself, but helps intimidate lesser monsters away from the village by mimicking the clinking of Rey Dau's armour. Despite its reputation for simply blasting things it doesn't like, carved descriptions show this noise actually comes from the tail specifically. And it's not impossible Rey Dau may at least initially warn other monsters who get in its way, before unleashing the railgun. Either way, this works for Konafa, who, while still at risk when they leave the village, only get their first attack in recent memory with the Deshagama assault in-game. This concept is also increasingly well known in our own world too, with playback calls of top predators being used to scare away other animals and reduce human-wildlife conflict. Recording of wolves and humans are used to scare deer away from crop fields, increasing crop yields, and providing a low-effort method of keeping the deer out of the fields. It can also be used on bigger targets too, and playback calls of tiger growls are successfully used to deter elephants from villages and crop fields in India. Elephants are essentially immune to predation, but their calves aren't, and elephants can often become anxious or unsettled by nearby predators. So again, this provides a safe and successful method of using the noises of one dangerous animal to keep another hazardous one out as well. For us, this is relatively new technology, as it's hard to passively and successfully replicate the noises of top predators, whereas Rey Dau's rattling tail provides an easy-to-mimic threat display. From what we see of the villager headdresses too, it seems the attire worn by the villagers pays reverence to the two most important animals in Konafa culture, the Dalthodon and Rey Dau. The village elder's headdress appears to resemble, and may even be made from, the bony crest of a Dalthodon, and their relationship with these small brood wyverns is obvious. Much of their food, and most of their protein, come from the Dalthodon, as well as the leather and wool for warm bedding and sand-resistant outerwear. So it's no surprise that the highest ranking person in the village wears their symbol, and that they outrank even the Thunder Wyvern. Many aspects of their way of life and continued existence is dependent on the Dalthodon, and Rey Dau too for the gem chimes, with their notable influence, hence why the lower ranking villagers pay tribute to the wyvern by having the horn-like appendages in their head wraps that resemble Rey Dau's bolt horns. As well as the tangible benefits Rey Dau brings, it's also hard to imagine it not having a major role in local mythology. Its huge golden appears to control thunder, sounds like a spirit escaping the other realm, intimidates everything beneath it, and appears at the height of the sand tide. It's hard not to form some spiritual beliefs with all that, but it's anyone's guess as to whether Rey Dau is the hero, villain, or another role entirely in the pantheon. Overall, I really like Rey Dau. There is no way around it. He's just inherently cooler, better Astalos. Astalos has things like a moronic deviant and fighting Rathalos to try and convince you he's cool. Rey Dau is just cool. A lot complain about flying wyverns as an overexposed class, but when they're as good as Rey Dau, and indeed the last handful of them, I'm generally quite happy for them to keep coming. With Rey Dau versus Arkveld, it does feel like there's meant to be some significance between the two's conflict, but the game never really does much with it. Arkveld is used to introduce Rey, and Rey to introduce Flying Wyvern Arkveld, and the two also have Arkveld's only bespoke turf war. But why Rey is repeatedly given this honour is uncertain, nor what we're supposed to think of it outside perhaps Arkveld cool. And yet, Rey Dau getting revived by a lightning blast might be one of the most badass things in the series, as well as the sheer style of literally making a loss more impressive than some victories seen. Rey Dau is, as the kids say, an aura farmer through and through, with everything it does just being so stylish. So stylish in fact that a lot of the team thought it was the actual flagship for a while. With a lot of Rey's moves, it almost feels like a lazy monster. So many of its attacks are it using momentum and gravity to fall on you. and it typically deals with lesser monsters with a zap instead of engaging physically. Design-wise, Rey Dau has a lot to like. It still manages to cut a pretty signature appearance in a wyvern-filled series, with its bolt horns, goblin face and stylized wings. It's also a nice understanding of when to apply flashiness and drama, and when to hold them back, giving them more weight when they are used, and without compromising on an otherwise grounded design. Interestingly, Rey Dau really resembles a winged bobbit worm, a type of large and carnivorous marine polychaete. Some of Balahara's concept art also showed it seemingly having a thunder element, so perhaps the two initially shared some early inspiration. Monsters in the design process can often borrow and split from one another, although this is usually in the same family. But it seems the ruler of the plains was always intended to have some giant worm inspiration, and also continues the ideas prevalent in Tokuda's games of terrestrial life with marine elements to its design, even outside of the more obvious areas like the highlands and the basin. Fight-wise, with Hammer, Rey Dau is a ton of fun. A very fast, frenetic fight with dramatic offsets and epic effects, the shattering of Fulgurite and Rey's railgun blasts. The use of his element as an epic climax to a bout of combat gives it so much more dramatic weight than a lot of other elemental monsters, especially when it's such a lethal attack, even in a relatively easy game. Rey Dau, with Hammer at least, I think is the easiest of the 4 inclemency apexes, or Monsters Inc., or rather the one who goes down the quickest. Jin is probably the hardest for obvious reasons. New Udra otherwise has the best defensive, and its novelty makes it an early stumbling block, and Uthduna against Hammer is a big damage sponge that takes a lot longer to go down than either Rey or Nu. But Rey is still a fairly decent glass cannon fight, or rather glass railgun, with the main skeleton divine death blast often still being a cart if you don't dodge it, especially against Arch-Tempered. With all that said, I think more so than any other apex, Rey Dau really leans into its inclemency more than the other Wilds apexes. Every single thing Rey Dau does meshes so well with the lightning storm to amp up the excitement and drama of the fight, and being a really good example of the incredible ambience Monster Hunter can create. It always looks especially cool when Rey Dau glides in over the top of the dune in darkness, with thunder crashing around it. And its theme is also quite spectacular, being dramatic enough to make you think the world itself was ending. Sound design too, again, great. Rey Dau has so much weirdness to it that really makes it stand out. The grinding scales and above all else the weird synthetic ghost wails it makes. It's hard not to imagine it being some spectre of death or the underworld in Konafa mythology, with how ethereal it sounds. Overall, a fantastic new flying wyvern to add to a stellar collection. Thanks for watching, and thanks as ever to my patrons: Bone Crusher Hyena, Toxic Wolf, The Superest Duper, DJ, Samburgo, K. Sandom, Octavia of the Fifth Fleet, Nickname 3110, Kieran McCarthy, Flygon's Archives, Hui Hui, Jabin, Phenomenon, The Belted Horned Warbler, Big Man Blastoise, Nathan Cross, Johnny, Oni, Tim Gojira, Teddy KGB, Waffle, Slashmaster 101, Dapperaptor, Aristocrat Mojo, Godzilla Prime 2, Original Username, Small Squid, Lytton Gamer 111, Evilly, Howleth, Archsaw Queen, Tommy Choi, Jacob Wilcox, Seth Fake Last Name, Sosir, Dodecablos, and Bazugazu Bakumatsu, whose generosity keeps the channel going. If you're interested in supporting too, a link is added in the description, and any amount is always appreciated. Thanks too to Kamen Rider Moten for their digital artwork pieces, I Am the Kaiju King for their Rey Dau skull, and to Archulosorian for helping with the in-game dialogue and screenshots. For more custom digital art, or skulls and monster anatomy, the links to all contributors are in the description below for you to check out in your own time. This video is the shortest large monster in Wilds thus far, and while some may expect Rey Dau to have higher billing in that regard, I should also add I've made 6 videos on large carnivorous flying wyverns. Even the most novel of them are going to tread some new ground, and Rey Dau is similar to Astalos for all of its quality. For any also worried about Series 2 of Primeval, it has now been recorded again, and hopefully won't die again either. I do plan to go up to Series 3 with them, and then probably stop there. The richness of Wilds and its returning cast have given me a fair bit to think about, and some have asked whether I'd do a sort of recall video on debunked or modified past theories, though I think I'd rather combine such ideas in relevant videos with the Wilds monsters, for both reach and video quality, as the second Wrath video generally didn't do all that well. This is also my plan for the endemic life, trying to include as much of their ecology and behaviour where relevant, in how it affects and interacts with the larger monsters, like here with the Keratinoth and their predator, and notes in the basin on Romp's video. Also hence why Uthduna was taken out of the Patreon poll, until the Gycrus and Nitsu were back. Hopefully this will lead to larger and richer videos overall. Speaking of, after a strong victory for Rey Dau, the next winner of the Patreon poll, and thus the next video will be